In Japan, there are 78 American military bases. 31 of these are on Okinawa. And more often than not, these bases are black holes, about which we know very little regarding their impact on local communities. This is particularly true when it comes to the environmental damage caused by military bases in Japan. Recently,岩波書店published my new book, 日米地位協定と基地公害. And this book is based upon 10,000 pages of internal reports from the American military. And all of these reports were obtained via the Freedom of Information Act. The book reveals how military bases in Japan have been contaminating this country with some of the most toxic substances known to humanity. We've got nerve agent, we've got dioxin, we've got radioactive waste. But this is not a historic problem. Very recently, the military has contaminated the drinking water of more than 700,000 Okinawan residents with cancer-causing chemicals that were found in firefighting foam. It's the largest incident of environmental pollution in Okinawa's history and one of the largest in Japan. In that case, tens of thousands of litres of radioactive water was dumped into the sewers of bases in Atsugi and Misawa. That incident occurred in June 2011, with waste contaminated during relief operations near the Fukushima meltdowns. In the United States, there are roughly 40,000 sites which have been contaminated by the American military. The map on the top left is from the news organization ProPublica, and it shows the scale of the problem within the US itself. Each colored spot is a military facility that has been contaminated with hazardous substances. Military bases are dirty places, and this fact is well known to most American people. The American government conducts environmental checks, and the results are made public. However, here in Japan, there are no environmental checks on the 78 American bases. This is because of the regulations, including the Status of Forces Agreement, or SOFA. So this is an area where FOIA can really make a difference. Since 2015, I've obtained about 12,000 pages of military reports about bases throughout Japan that have been contaminating their local communities. It's a problem which impacts a vast number of people: American service members, their families, base workers, Japanese residents living near these military installations. This contamination has been going on for decades, but I'd like to pick out 3 recent cases that FOIA has helped to uncover. In 1995 and 1996, the US Marines contaminated a small Okinawan island with depleted uranium. The island is a shooting range called Torishima, and according to internal reports, the Marine Corps jets fired about 1,500 DU rounds at that island. 1 year later, they told the Japanese government about the incident, and they called it a mistake. American and Japanese inspectors, they tried to clean up the DU, but they couldn't find most of the rounds that had been fired. Approximately 188 kilograms of DU remained on the island. The military, they then claimed that the DU posed no health risk, but internal reports that I obtained via FOIA, they show that those assurances are not true. As recently as 2010, the Air Force was so worried about potential DU contamination that it couldn't send troops onto the island to conduct surveys. In that case, in the case of Torishima, the military displayed concern for the health of its troops and also for the health of its own members. But in the next case, the military showed no such care for its own service members. Reports from 2000 and 2001 They show how troops were sent into an old hospital at Cadena Air Base for combat training. What these troops were not told was that the building was constructed with materials containing asbestos. The training required troops to use axes and chainsaws to practice forced entries in that building. According to the report, powdery asbestos, it spread across a very, very wide area. None of the troops would have been equipped with ventilators or hazmat gear. Realizing that these men and these women had been exposed, I asked the military to alert the troops to the matter, but according to my sources, the military made no notifications. They didn't notify these troops that they'd been potentially exposed. So because of that, I uploaded the document to my homepage to help any of the troops that had been poisoned during those operations. But nowhere, literally nowhere, is military negligence more apparent than in the case of PFAS contamination in Okinawa's drinking water. I venture that PFAS is a word that many of you do not know, but it's a word that more recently many Okinawans and many American people are beginning, unfortunately, to understand. PFAS is a family of compounds which are resistant to heat, oil and water. They're found in non-stick cookware, stain-resistant clothing, and one of their most widespread uses is in the firefighting foam that is found on military bases. PFAS is a nasty group of substances. It damages the liver, it damages the thyroid, it can also damage fetuses and cause cancer. It's harmful to humans at very, very low levels. In the United States, the drinking water around more than 100 military bases has been contaminated with PFAS. And there's currently a lot of anger and media coverage of this issue in the United States and also on Okinawa. For example, in May, President Trump, his White House, they tried to cover up one of the new releases of the reports about PFAS. So the military, because of these scandals in America, it's been forced to test the water around its bases. In also American bases in United States, South Korea, Belgium and Germany, they've started cleanup operations in their overseas bases. But on Okinawa, it has taken no such measures. On Okinawa in 2015, the drinking water source near Cadena Air Base was found to be contaminated with PFAS. But the military has repeatedly tried to distance itself from this contamination. Luckily, we have FOIA, and documents released via FOIA, they reveal numerous cases where firefighting foam was spilled on Okinawa's bases. The photos along the left side of the slide, they show just one of these accidents which took place at Cadena Air Base in 2013. In addition, there have been many, many other such leaks of these chemicals. The levels of contamination discovered in Okinawa's drinking water in 2015, they exceeded EPA standards. And this water, it was supplied to roughly 700,000 Okinawan residents. Also, it was provided to American service members, it was provided to their families, and also the hundreds of thousands of tourists who visit Okinawa every year. On Okinawa, no health checks have been conducted, nor has there been any compensation paid by the military. June the 21st, I contacted the American Marines to ask for their comment on these issues, and they still haven't replied to my request for comment. So you can see this is one of the biggest cover-ups in modern Japanese history of environmental contamination. It's the largest incident of environmental contamination. 700,000 residents have been affected, but without FOIA, this problem might not have come to light. Just as most Americans today are aware of contamination caused by the military, I think also most Americans are aware of the high rate of sexual violence within the military as well. There have been many documentaries in America made on this subject, and the American media regularly reports these issues as well. So I'd like to talk a little bit about NCIS and how FOIA can help us to reveal the true rate of American military crime on Okinawa. Again, this is an area which the military does all it can to conceal. However, FOIA can lift the lid on this problem, especially, as I said, via requests to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, the NCIS. Reports obtained via FOIA, they catalogue dozens of recent cases in which Marines on Okinawa were investigated for very violent sexual offences. However, they were either not brought to trial or they received only very, very minor punishments. NCIS reports show that between 2015 and 2016, Marines on Okinawa, they targeted Japanese civilians, including children, in at least 4 previously unpublicized sexual offense cases. 2 of these cases involved violent sexual attacks on adult women. And in another case, a Marine, he allegedly exposed himself on 2 occasions outside schools near Camp Hansen in Kim Town. In that exposure case, the Japanese police, they seem to have abandoned their investigation only because the suspect refused to be interviewed. This NCIS investigation, it involved a lot of digging. It took about 6 months of research, but again it showed how FOIA can really help to reveal what the powers that be would rather remain hidden. The final area about which I'd like to talk about today is how FOIA can be used to report on CIA operations in Japan. I've written widely on this topic for Okinawa Times. For example, I wrote a series of articles about the CIA's main Cold War base at Camp Chinen in Nanjo Town. And also I've written about the CIA's former monitoring station in Yomitan village, at the time one of the largest listening posts in the world. But again, the CIA interest in Okinawa, it's not historical, it is ongoing. Following a FOIA request to the CIA last year, I received a package through the post, and inside was a 60-page report dated 2012. And the title was Understanding Base Politics in Okinawa. The report, it was part of a series called Master Narratives. And other reports in the same series, they focus on Syria, they focus on Afghanistan, and they focus on Al-Qaeda. So the fact that the CIA felt it necessary to write such a report about Okinawa is really very, very revealing. At the time, 2012, the DPJ was in power, and it suggests the CIA saw the DPJ as a very real threat to American interests in Japan. The CIA manual, it aimed at advising American officials on how to shape Okinawan public opinion about the presence of their 31 military bases on their tiny island. It offered American policymakers a number of approaches to win over Okinawans' hearts and minds. For example, the CIA advised American policymakers to claim that American bases benefit the economy, they promote cultural exchange, and they provide disaster relief. At the same time, the report warned policymakers not to bring up military deterrence or environmental issues. Moreover, the CIA has some very harsh words for the Japanese government. The CIA criticizes the government for being insensitive to Okinawan issues. Also, it describes discrimination against Okinawans as a problem solely involving mainland Japan, and the American government bears no blame for this discrimination.